Alright, so everyone is throwing around One Piece live action takes like crazy, saying the most wild and obscene things, some people even liking it more than the anime, and honestly, thus far, I'm liking it too, but I've reached the first thing that I've really disliked in the entire story, and that is the first thing that they've messed up and is a lot worse than it was in the manga. And honestly, they've done a lot of the manga justice, and a lot of the changes they've made have made sense, and honestly, I've enjoyed the changes they've made, and they're not terrible, and they do benefit the pacing and benefit the live action form, but there was always this question of how were the fights gonna work. A lot of the fights at the beginning and then the trailer seemed grounded, but there were all moments that we knew weren't particularly insane. But how are they gonna handle the big climactic fights in the story that make One Piece so great? How were they gonna handle those changes? And the answer is by making them seem as if they're regular people fighting them. And honestly, I think the biggest comparison you can make to how they were gonna do this is with The Boys. The Boys is a lot like the first live action anime. It's a superhero show that is very dark, that has crazy moments, crazy climactic fights, and honestly they do it really well with stellar CGI, and it does fit The Boys a little bit better. But how was One Piece gonna do it? How is that gonna convert to anime? Because a lot of The Boys characters, unlike anime characters, are like normal people, so how were they gonna do this in anime and make these crazy characters with crazy abilities work? Because The Boys is written in the story that is supposed to be in America. It's a lot more grounded than a wild fantasy world like One Piece. One Piece handled this by grounding their fights and making their characters seem like normal people to an extent. Now the fight I'm of course talking about, and the moment I'm of course talking about that I really did not like and nearly as much in the manga, is Zoro versus Mihawk. So let's start with Mihawk. Mihawk for one is introduced differently, of course. He is of course fighting Don Krieg, and we see him fighting on the beach while talking to Garp with the little earpiece. That is kind of cool. I like that change. At the same time, Mihawk is talking a lot more than he normally would, which is fine. I think having a completely silent, like really strong character would have been really weird in a live action setting. That's okay. And he's basically destroying them all with this big sword, and I feel like that action scene wasn't the best. And also it was cool though, of course, when he sliced their boat from the island. That's one of the craziest scenes in the entirety of the live action. And of course the flip side of that, the other person in this is Zoro, and Zoro is kind of just fully leaning into the brooding. He feels more like Zoro from Time Skip, and that is an issue to an extent because Zoro is supposed to be getting drunk, which of course he's doing. He's also supposed to be telling jokes and showing a lot more emotion, and we don't really see that. But to their defense, it would be a lot harder for Zoro in a live action setting to pull off being brooding and then all of a sudden he's joking and having fun. I think a way they could have done this is have him have like a drunk side that is he's fun and hubby, but I do understand that change. But at the same time, these are two different characters, so when they do meet, first of all, the scene is a little weird. No one is watching, which is completely different, and also they're fighting at the entrance of Barati on this platform that looks clearly there just for this fight. And the fight for one felt a lot shorter than it did in the anime and manga, and two, at the same time, it was not nearly as intense. You had no faith in Zoro in this fight, and Mihawk did not have the same aroma as he did the first time when he was coming through the sea. And also the fight itself didn't have the same emotional stakes, because it wasn't like when he got stabbed, it wasn't as crazy of a moment, because when you're seeing that in a live action setting, that he wasn't bleeding nearly as much. It felt like, and it was like, oh, he just has a toothpick in him, what's going on? We know that that's a big moment in the One Piece world when he fights him with the toothpick. I feel like they really didn't display that well as when he put in his three swords in his mouth. It just looked weird. It didn't land quite right for me personally. As the fight went on and he eventually got the big moment where he lost and he told Luffy he was never gonna lose again, this actor could not cry for the life of him, which isn't the end of the world. But at the same time, it didn't have the same emotional stakes, and it felt like a random forced placement to please the manga fans and anime fans. I think they felt a pressure to do this, and a lot of this fight, the choreography felt a lot more like a normal sword fight, as if in a grounded story, and it didn't feel like a big climactic anime fight, which it wasn't exactly the most crazy thing in the anime and manga. But at the same time, with everyone watching, with the Luffy Don Krieg and everyone looking on with Zeph, it felt a lot more impactful then than it did here. I think a big part of that is because the lack of connection to the character and the forced grounding of these fights. And honestly, I don't think it made it terrible. I don't think it was horrible. I do think though it was the most disappointing, and honestly, maybe that's what I should have expected considering the story and considering all the changes they're gonna make. Even though I've been critical of it, I've really enjoyed the One Piece live action. I really like some of the changes they made. And Sanji and Barati in this episode was overall, ironically enough, my favorite episode in the series. But I think Zoro vs Mihawk felt rushed and was just in there to please us. Let me know what you think down below, and don't worry, I do like the One Piece live action. You can go check out my other video on it right here, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget, we're just getting started, we're gonna stay consistent, and I'll see you in the next video.